Well, good morning. So it's good to see you here. Uh, Let me say something I keep forgetting to say every Sunday, but lately I've started a practice of putting some study notes together on a handout. I also include some follow-up discussion questions, whether you join us after our adult Sunday school follows through those things and carries our discussion a little bit further. My purpose is to put these in your hands so that you have something to look back on, and if you want to follow up and dig a little bit deeper in things that we've talked about over this last little while, you can do so. Kind of make it that size so it'll fit into most Bibles, and I hope it's helpful for you. Take one and make me feel good, okay? If you take it home and make paper airplanes out of it, I'm okay with it. Just take them out. Thank you. So, does this describe you? Do you sometimes ask yourself, why am I here? Why on earth? Why am I on earth? Am I on this planet at this time and place? I like Snoot. I like Peanuts. There's a lot of wisdom that is found there in these cartoons, and I don't know about you, but sometimes it does. Thank you. That I have to turn around. Wow. I want you to notice how I'm getting used to using PowerPoint. My general, my response to PowerPoint is God has the power, and I just point to Him. So, but I try to keep you a little bit more entertained that way. So, have you thought about that? Why are you here on this earth? Notice, I'm not asking why you're here in church today. That'd be a good question. I'd be interested in following up because some of you are just because that's what you do Sunday morning, right? Did you come expecting to meet with God? Did you come expecting to experience His Spirit in a powerful way, some way? Right? I think God has a way of ambushing us, by the way, sometimes when we least expect it. So we're glad you're here, but the question goes a little bit farther than that, and it says, why are you here at this time and this particular location? Do you have a clear sense of purpose for your life? Or is it just kind of you go through the motions every day and, well, this is what you've done, and your lifestyle just kind of follows a certain pattern? Having a clear sense of purpose does a number of things for us. For one, it gives meaning and significance to your life. If you feel like your life doesn't have meaning and significance, maybe it traces back to the fact that you don't have a clear purpose of why you're here. It gives greater focus to your life. You have a sense of direction. You have a sense of why you get up in the morning, why you go to work, why you have a family, why you come to church. It all kind of fits together. But it also simplifies decision making. Now notice I didn't say it makes it easier, because decision making is not necessarily easy, but it does simplify decision making, especially when you make those have to make the big decision in life. What school you're going to go to, what job you're going to take, where are you going to live, who are you going to marry, are you going to start a family? If you have a sense of purpose to your life, it brings these things together. I might add that often when I do premarital counseling with couples that are getting married, I encourage them to come up with a sense of mission for their marriage that is beyond just creating this nice, comfortable home for them to raise family in or do whatever. Because I'll tell you, and we know this from experience, when you have this overarching sense of mission and experience for your life, that purpose for your life, those conflicts that come up, and they do come up, okay? Nobody is 100% compatible, okay? So you put two people together in a relationship and you close the doors on them and put them, say, you got to live in these quarters, you will have conflict. That's just a given. And do I have any witnesses from any married couples here, right? And I say, if you never have conflict, you probably aren't totally, one of you at least is not being totally honest with the other one. So conflict is a result of that. But when you have this bigger sense of purpose of why you are here, why you got married in the first place, that goes beyond just yourselves, your little lives, it keeps you going. Jesus models for us what it means to live, to what it looks like. It means to live a life that is purpose-driven, to live a life with purpose. I'm just going to run through these texts. We're not going to read them, but I just point out, right at the very start, when he first starts out in ministry, he's been baptized, he's been through the wilderness experience, he comes into the synagogue and he reads from Isaiah, and he reads out, he says, that from Isaiah the prophet, he says, the Spirit of the Lord is on me, because he anointed me to proclaim good news to the poor. He has sent me to proclaim freedom for the prisoners and recovery of sight to the blind, to set the oppressed free, to proclaim the year of the Lord's favor. Then he rolled up the scroll, and he gives it back to the attendant, and then he sits down, and he says, Luke tells the eyes were everywhere on him, and he says to them, today this scripture is fulfilled in your hearing. In other words, this is the purpose of my life. This is why I have come. In Matthew, we find that what does he do when he first goes out? He starts out exactly and doing exactly what he said he would do. He goes through Galilee, teaching their synagogues, proclaiming, Matthew says, good news of the kingdom, and healing every disease and sickness among the people. And the news begins to spread about him, and he develops, a lot of people begin coming to him, and followers, they come from all over to witness and experience that. Then we get into Mark, his experience in Mark, and he's been kind of taking place throughout the whole day. He's been healing people and teaching people. And then the night comes, they sleep. He gets up early in the morning, Mark says, and he says, very early in the morning, while it was still dark, Jesus got up, he left the house, went off to a solitary place where he prayed. By the way, that is the secret to one of the key things to Jesus' ministry and his effectiveness. We need to pay attention to that. But the next day, Simon and his companions went to look for him. When they found him, they said, everyone is looking for you. Now, I dare say, and I'm probably not alone as a pastor, if somebody came to me and said, hey, everybody's looking for you. You got to come to church because we got this big gathering. We'd be excited about that, wouldn't we? We'd say, yeah, let's do something with him. That's not what Jesus does. He replied, he said, well, let us go somewhere else, to the nearby villages, so I can preach there also, and that is why I have come. So he traveled and left. He did not allow other people to set the agenda for his life. When you have a clear sense of purpose, you will not lack, by the way, you will not lack for people who will try to set the agenda for your life, to give you direction. If you don't have any purpose, you ask your spouse, ask your kids, ask your parents. You'll be given somebody else's purpose for your life, but it won't be your own. So we started this series asking the question, do you sometimes feel like something is not quite right with your life? Back to Charlie Brown. He says, well, sometimes I lie awake at night and ask, where have I gone wrong? Something doesn't feel quite right. And he says, and then a voice says to me, this is going to take more than one night. So we're doing a sermon series because it's going to take more than one Sunday to talk about this. But what we're talking about is rebooting your life. Is if you have that feeling that something isn't quite right, well, most likely that's true. It probably isn't. So we're looking at different areas of your life and saying, maybe in some of these areas everything's going good, but maybe along the way we can put our finger on something that says, I need to reboot my life. I need to readjust, make some adjustments in this in order to get back on track. These first 3 sermons, the last 2 and today, are really fundamental to what we're going to talk about in the next 3 weeks. Next, we're going to talk about how you spend your time. Then we're going to talk about how you spend your money. And then we're going to talk about relationships. These 3 are fundamental. First one is about getting God's vision for your life. Maybe things don't feel quite right because God's stirring some restlessness and saying, it's time for you to kind of go in a different direction. Last week we talked about getting, in a sense, God's flight plan for your life. And maybe you just started out, slightly off track, just a degree or 2. But the longer you go that way, the farther off course you get. And now you feel like something isn't right. Time to get back on course. And today I want to talk about what it means to live life with a purpose. Defining and getting a sense of purpose for your life. So one possibility here that things don't seem quite right is that you've lost your sense of purpose. Or at best, it's kind of become kind of hazy and not clearly defined for you. So what I want to do is go through a series of questions here. And they are in your little outlines that you can, and the time that we take here, we're going to just kind of go through them fairly quickly, okay? Another reason for putting those outlines in your hands is because really it calls for you to take some time on your own to reflect on these things and to think them through a little bit more in depth. Get together with somebody else, with maybe in a small group, 2 or 3 other people, and talk about these things, because these are, I think, are vital points for you to lead a healthy life, a God-pleasing one. So, process of defining the purpose for your life. So you see some questions I want to invite you to ask yourself, and we're going to look at them. First question, who am I? If I were to ask you, who are you? How would you answer that question? Well, you might begin with your name. That's your God, get your parent-given name. Sometimes our parents give us names that they are symbolic or mean something to them. I think most often parents name their kids because they like the name. So you have a name. Maybe you talk about your family, or where you grew up, or what you do. You're a student, or you work at this job, and that now defines you. That's who you are. The question is, who are you in spite of all that? When you finish school, when you graduate and Lord willing, get out of that environment and move on to, who are you then? If you're on a job, and these days so much employment is on a contract basis. When that contract expires and it isn't renewed, who are you then? I have to admit that when I retired back in, because it goes back about 3 or 4 years ago now, originally from pastoring, I went through an identity crisis, because that's how I knew myself for the last 30-some years. And it was like, okay, so now, Don, who are you that you're not a pastor anymore? I kind of delayed answering that question by taking on the offer to come here to be a part-time pastor. So now I'm only part-time, going through a part-time identity crisis. Behind the question, who am I, who are you, is understanding, peeling back some of the layers and saying, who are you underneath? What is your personality and temperament like? It's worth finding that out. Diane and I, when I was in seminary, we went through it's a Myers-Briggs personality test, temperament test. And I can't tell you how many aha moments we had as we sat with the counselor and went through it step by step, and we began to understand ourselves better and understand some of those rocky points in a relationship and understand why we had some conflicts. You see, in Myers-Briggs, they do 4 different pairings, and we were direct opposites on 3 of them. So Diana's the extrovert. I'm the introvert. Nobody believes me when I say it, but I'm the introvert. I'm painfully shy. I always say my ideal job would have been lighthouse keeper, because I wouldn't have to talk to anybody. I could do my favorite pastime, which is watching stormy oceans. Just leave me enough coffee and books to read, and I don't need anything else. I've depended on Diana to help me. When I go with visits, I always grab her to go with me. And so we go to, if you're ever in the hospital, we come together. She'll carry the conversation. And I know the visit's over when she turns to me, tells the person, and now Don's going to pray for you. So I come to do the pastoral business of praying for you. She does the pastoral care by talking with you, and together we make a team. Your personality. Your personality may be such that you're not cut out to do what you think what you're doing right now. I've talked to any number of people who find themselves, they're in jobs where they have to meet people, but they're introverts like me. They need to move into a different kind of position. Temperament. What is your temperament? See, these things determine how you process information, how you take in information, how you process it, and how you make decisions. And if you work on a team situation anywhere, whether it's at work, in church, or any place, even with your home, you do well to begin to understand the other person as well as yourself, because you begin to understand Diana makes decisions fairly quickly. I don't. And so we will go, in our early years, we go out shopping for major things. And she already said, this is what we need to get. And I need to think about it a little bit longer. And then I go back and think, and I usually agree with her because she's always right. But happy wife, happy life. So I kind of go along with it. There's some really good personality testing out there. Myers-Briggs is one. There's an abbreviated, shorter version, which is free online, which is called Kiersey. Does the same thing, much the same thing, but not as involved. Another one people use is the Enneagram, which is also very helpful. So who am I? What is my personality temperament? Begin to understand yourself. What are your gifts and abilities? In other words, what are you good at? Before we go on to that, what is most important to me? What are my values and priorities? You need to understand, actually I got ahead of myself. What are my gifts and abilities? What am I good at? We all are gifted in some ways, and none of us are gifted in every way. I mean, there's a few people out there, maybe it describes some of you or you know somebody, that seem to be able to have a knack to do everything and anything. But few of us have that. But we all have a particular gift that God has given us. And I'm not just talking about spiritual gifts right now. I'm talking about actual gifts and abilities. We come across that earlier in the book of Exodus when Moses is gathering people together, the right kind of people together to build the tabernacle and then to equip it. And so we're told of a man named Bezalel, of whom it was said that the Lord had chosen him. And it says, and he was filled with the Spirit of God with skill, ability, and knowledge of all kinds of crafts, to make artistic designs for work in gold, silver, and bronze, to cut and set stones, to work in wood, and to engage in all kinds of craftsmanship. And then it says, and he was also given the ability to teach others. What a phenomenal thing to be able to do, is to take the gift that you have and to be able to teach others. Because no matter what gifts or abilities you have, you need to develop them. They don't just kind of develop on their own. By the way, our gifts and abilities are often recognized first by others in us. In fact, often when people compliment us about things, we tend to be a little bit humbled, and maybe even a little bit of false modesty and humility. Say, no, I'm not that. Can I talk to parents for a minute? You bless your children by recognizing when you see them do something and you recognize and you acknowledge that there's a gift there. May I step on a few toes? It may not be a gift or an ability that's going to earn them a lot of money. We tend to want to channel our kids in areas where they're going to get jobs that pay well. The fulfillment of a life well lived is not found in the pay that you get for it financially. The payment for a life well lived is found in a sense of fulfillment, because you have the sense of, this is what I was called to do, this is where I'm called to be. So can I challenge you as parents? Bless your children. Acknowledge what they do well, even though it may not in keeping with your plan and purpose for their lives. Bless them and allow them to grow up to be the person God created them to be, not the person you just want them to be. My passion growing up in Latin America was soccer, or what we call football. I desperately wanted my son to play. And I think probably to appease that, or maybe just to fulfill that desire, he played, and I coached for about a year or two. He wasn't cut out to play soccer. When Jonathan ran, he looked like he was coming apart at the seams. He was so uncoordinated as a runner. But he could stand up on a skateboard, something I could never do. He had other things. He was fairly creative in many different ways. Won't go into those, but anyway, some of his creative ways got him into trouble. So focus on developing those strengths and take note of what they are. Okay, so the second question here is, what is most important to me? What are your values and priorities in life? Remember, we looked at Romans 12:2 last week. When you think of your values, beware of being squeezed into what the world around you thinks is most valuable. We are bombarded, as I said last week, with advertising that says power, position, and possessions, the 3 Ps. Those are the most important things in your life. So you strive to find a position that gives you power and prestige, earns you enough to have possessions. The world will squeeze you into its mold. What are your values? And I know we're in church and we should spiritualize these things. If you really need an objective analysis of where your values are, I was going to say check your day timer, but nobody here uses day timers except for me. Take your phone out and look at your calendar. Where do you spend most of your time when you're not at work or at school? What do you spend most of your time doing? Then go to your bank statement. Keep your phone out because it's probably on there as well. And where do you spend most of your money? I mean, I know there's food, there's housing, and all those kinds of things. Where do you spend the rest of your money? How you spend your time and how you spend your money are determined by what you think is most important. And you can say anything you like about what you value the most. You can say, well, I value my family. Talk to men particularly tend to be workaholics. They value their family, but you would never know it by the amount of time that they spend at home. You can say, I value my church, but you'd never know it by the amount of involvement they have in the level of ministries in the church. How you spend your time and how you spend it, we're going to look at those over the next 2 weeks. So I won't go farther on with that. If you want to question to find out exactly where your values, where your priorities are, that is a good indication. Under what is most important to me, what am I passionate about? What really stirs me? I said I grew up in Latin America. We had 3 passions there, pretty much in this order. Soccer or football, politics, and sometimes religion, usually in that order. For the longest time after I left and came, I could not drive by a soccer field. If there was a game on, I had to stop and go watch. It was compulsive behavior. It was something that gripped me. What is most important to you? How do you spend your time? What are you most passionate about? What activity or cause gives you stirs your heart greatly? Come back to that one in a while. What are the life experiences that you have had? That includes family of origin and home life growing up. What was it like growing up in your home? You and I have default settings that were put in place that we've probably never acknowledged or recognized unless we stop to process things that are a result of the home in which we grew up in. How you handle conflict is probably preset and determined by how you saw your parents or how conflict was handled in your home. What you even think is most valuable or most important, which goes back to the last question, was probably a default setting that was set in your home. The experiences that we have in our home shape us in ways that we don't always stop to realize. Tell me if you're more of an adult and you left home sometime and you don't find yourself doing something and you can hear mom or dad sitting on your shoulder saying, don't do that. Diana particularly, and I grew up in very industrious, high work ethic homes. And to this day, I have to tell Diana, you got to listen to your body, not to your dad. Because we both had fathers, dads, who basically, unless you were on your deathbed, you had no excuse for not getting up out of bed, getting dressed, and going about and getting engaged what needed to get done that day. And so we are both tend to be driven, and forgive us for this, tend to have to dig deep to be a little bit more empathetic and compassionate to people who aren't as nearly as driven as we are. We will overload ourselves, but it's because you can hear, is it all right? You hear your dad sitting there say, don't be lazy. Get going. Get moving. That's pure laziness, just to lie in bed just because you're not feeling well. Experiences that we have growing up shape us. But I want to talk about other experiences, painful as well as happy experiences. And I want to touch on particularly those painful experiences. And maybe you're starting out at a point in life where you haven't had a lot of those, but maybe they will come. We are shaped more by the painful experiences than we are by our happy ones. And how they shape us is dependent on how we respond to them, how we treat them. You can become bitter about stuff, or you can allow it to make you into a better person. We've shared oftentimes here that our son was, in early age, got into addiction and eventually died of an overdose. And I can remember processing that. I can't say that ever in my life I've gone through anything more painful than that. And you don't get over it, by the way. You get through it, but you don't get over it. Getting through it is a lifelong process. But my question isn't, why did this happen? I knew why it happened. But I wasn't blaming God for it. My question was, what do we do with this now? See, Paul talks about experiencing suffering in Romans 8. And we often quote this verse, Romans 8:28, out of context. But he's talking about how this is part of life and how God meets us in our weaknesses. And even when we're praying, through the Spirit tells us, shows us what to pray about. And it's then talking about all that kind of suffering in that sense of context. He says, and we know that on all things God works for the good of those who love him, who have been called according to his purpose. He's talking about, in some translate pushes, God works all things for the good. I want to be clear here. God isn't going to take your tough and hard and painful experiences and make them something good. That isn't the case. But he can, if you allow him to work in your life, he can shape you in a very positive way, and he can bring good from it. The choice is yours. With our son, we chose to say, how does this open doors for us to be of help to other people? Person who was in our previous church was taught school, and she taught grades 6 and 7. And she says, Don, would you come and talk about Jonathan's life and just give us a little bit of a workshop on the effect of drugs? And I did, because you see, and I set him up because I took baby pictures of Jonathan, put them up on the screen. I had all his school pictures up to grade 7. That was his last grade completed in school. And then I shut the PowerPoint down and I said, he looks like just any one of you, doesn't he? It's about between grade 7 and grade 8, he made some choices that took him in a different direction in life. You can allow God to work for his good, for his plan and his purpose through your life. What has taken place with you. Even those things that you've been responsible for making bad decisions yourself. And believe me, you and I were present at every single bad decision we made. We would like to blame other people, but we are the common denominator at all the terrible, bad decisions that we've made. God doesn't turn those things into good. But he allows, if you allow him, he can work some good from that for his plan and purpose. Notice that it's according to his purpose, but he works all things for the good of those who love him and who have been called according to his purpose. You and I have been called according to his purpose. We have a choice in those matters if we would allow him to do that. So don't waste the pain. Don't wallow it. You have to allow yourself time to find healing and wholeness in it, and that can be, depending on the pain, can be a process. And some of you perhaps have been through some pretty terrible kind of things, and I'm not trying to minimize that. I'm just saying, if you allow God to do so, he can bring something good from it. He can redeem that. The next one is, kind of brings things to a head here. What is a need in the world that stirs my heart? And it is what breaks my heart that also breaks the heart of God. You know, when we look at the life and ministry of Jesus in the passage on Matthew, it says he looked around and he saw that the people were lost like sheep without a shepherd. And it says he was filled with compassion. The expression there is that it was just gut-wrenching for him to see the pain and the lost lives of the people in front of him. And that's what he was called to do. So it provided him with incentive to keep on what he's been called to do. Seem to be ringing up here. Matthew 5:13 and 16. And Ephesians 2, which were read for us earlier. The calling to follow Jesus is one to be the salt of the earth and to be the light of the world. You cannot do either one in isolation. My concern about Christians, and I see this, I've been a pastor for a lot of years. I see people come to follow Jesus, to put their faith and trust in him. And then eventually they kind of surround themselves with new friendships and new relationships, and that's great. And then they lose touch with the old side of their life. And within about 5 years, they have little or no contact with the outside world except for at arm's length when they're in school or at work. You cannot be light of the world if you're simply in a well-lit room all the time. Light shines brightest where it's in the darkness. It goes back to having your heart broken for those things that break the heart of God. Paul in Ephesians says, we've been saved by faith. That is not of yourself, that's a gift of God. Not through works that anybody should boast. And then he says, you've been created in Christ Jesus to do good works, which were prepared for you in advance. I want you to know that God has something for you to do in the course of your lifetime, and it may be more than one time. I'm not saying just kind of narrow and then you're done and you're on your own. That he is prepared for you to do well in advance. In fact, that's part of our calling, is to do good works, is to be engaged in making the world a better place, to bring in healing and a measure of wholeness to people's lives that are so broken. But honestly, for us to move out of the comfort zones that we live in, the comfortableness of being surrounded by people like us and coming together in church, and I'm okay with that. This is a great place to experience community. Is we need to get outside of that comfort zone and feel the discomfort of experiencing the brokenness that's around us. Good reason for you to go on a mission trip, by the way. Big plug for Casa Luz. Team's coming together. We're leaving. We hope you join us. If you've never been on a mission trip, if the way you've traveled is simply by vacation, you need to take a mission trip someplace. You need to be someplace where people are less fortunate than you are, and not at arm's length, not just because you stay in an all-inclusive and you go shopping in their stores. You need to experience the brokenness of the world around you. And we don't do that sitting in here. You need to get out and involved in life outside the community of the church. Let's put it all together. We've been talking about 4 questions. We're talking about how this helps us define our purpose in life. And what I want you to know is your life has purpose. And your life has a purpose that is bigger than just your life. So think of it as these 4 circles. And it's wherever the circles overlap that you can find, this is my life purpose. Who am I? What do I care most about? What have I experienced in life? What is the need in the world that touches my heart? And that center part where those things come together, I tell you that you will find God's purpose for your life and His calling on your life. You can be focused on just the other outside ones, and you can get to your life and you will have missed out on the greater sense of fulfillment that comes with doing something that is beyond you. And when I say it's bigger than your life, it's bigger than your lifetime. I'm struck that twice in the book of Hebrews, when we go through the chapter on faith, chapter 11, twice, the writer of the book of Hebrews says, and these people were living by faith, but they didn't experience the fulfillment of the promise during their lifetime. And at the end of the chapter, the writer of the Hebrews says, this is because they were made perfect or made complete. In other words, their purpose in life was made complete in those of us who are a result of their faithfulness and their living by faith. When you live by faith and you invest your life in something bigger than your life, there are generations down the road, there are people down the road that you will never meet in this lifetime who will experience God at work in their lives as well because of that. Conversely, when we live lives in a very self-centered way, which is the way the world tells us to live, you first, me first, we miss out on the bigger thing that God is doing in and around us. Let me just apply it to our church just for a few minutes and then I'll close. We can think church is about us. And service becomes serve us. It's not why the church exists. Mission is not a program or just a part of who we are as a church. We exist as the Church of Jesus Christ because we have a mission. If we didn't have a mission, we wouldn't exist. That is exactly what gives the church its power and its direction. And we should be making every decision within the church based on what our mission is and what our vision is to fulfill that mission. There's a lot of good things that we can get involved in, just like there's a lot of good things that you can invest your life in. It's like light diffused. Light diffused doesn't really help much of anybody. It creates a nice ambience for when you turn the lights down low and might have a candlelight dinner or a situation like this where we just have lights turned down low. But it's light focus that becomes laser sharp, that cuts through things. God has called us to be laser lights, not diffused lights. So as you consider, and I hope we work through, what is your life purpose? What is the purpose of life? so that you can live with purpose. You consider how you can be this force to be contend with that is empowered by the Holy Spirit to bring light into the darkness, salt where it needs that kind of sense of added to life, where you can bring wholeness to the sense of brokenness that's around us. And you can invest in the lives of others without necessarily having to get something back. And my prayer and vision for Pacific Grace MB is that we would take on that same role. That we would be engaged in trying to connect with our community, connect with people outside the church, without the sense of saying, this is only successful if we get one more person inside the church and one more dollar into offering plate. That is not the measure of success. We're called to be a transforming influence in the community in which God has placed us, which is this one. And you've been called to be a transforming influence in the part of the world that you live, work, and play and study in. May you discover your God-given purpose for life so that you can live life with purpose. Father, thank you for the example that Jesus gives us. And we acknowledge that we're prone to sometimes say, well, that's Jesus, he was part God. But you, Jesus, came to show us and put in our language so we would understand who God is, but you also came to show us what it meant to be fully, truly human and to live that way. So may we read and study and digest the gospel accounts of your life and ministry so that we might model our lives after how you lived and learn what it means to live life with a greater purpose than that which is fulfilled just in our own lifetime and makes just lived with us at the center. May we experience that today in Jesus' name. Amen.